Hello and welcome, my fifth grade friends. This is another segment of tips, tricks, and other math tools with Miss Fields. And today I am going to be focusing on helping you guys with 2 by 2 multiplication. So, as you know, we've learned in class that there's several different strategies that we can use when attacking 2 by 2 multiplication problems. The skill that I'm going to be focusing on today is called the distributive property. So, a nicer, easier way to describe the distributive property is basically breaking down numbers into manageable chunks that make it easy to multiply. So let's take a look at these two numbers here. We've got 87 and 63. I don't know about you guys, but just looking at these two numbers, a little bit intimidating. I don't think I could multiply these in my head right off the top. I would need to break it down. So that's what we're going to do. So I know, using the distributive property, that numbers can be broken down into their place values. So if we take a look here at this 63, I know that on the right side, there's 3 ones, and on the left side, there's 6 tens. So I can just simply break them apart into their respective place values, tens and ones. A quick way to double check that you distributed your number into tens and ones correctly is just by adding them up. So if I wanted to check, did I put that into the right place value and this into the right place value? All I would have to do is add up this 60, add up this 3, and double check it. 60 plus 3 is 63. So I correctly distributed this into tens and into ones. From there, in order to find the product of this multiplication problem, you would need to distribute this 87 to the 60 and to the 3. By distribute, I mean pair them up and multiply. But I'm looking here and I'm seeing 87 times 60 and 87 times 3. And I'm thinking, okay, distributive property is supposed to make the multiplication process easier. This is still way too big. This is still way too big for me to multiply simply. So what I'm still going to need to do is I'm going to need to use the distributive property to take this a step further and break apart this 87. Again, into tens and into ones. So, looking at this expression down here, I'm sure I'm reading your mind when I hear you say, Miss Fields, what happened to the 63? You had them put together perfectly here with parentheses. Where did they go? So if you look at these lines right here, they're indicating that we are distributing the 60 and we're distributing the 3 to be multiplied by this 87. So let's take a look. We've got our 60 here, and we distributed it to be multiplied by this 80 and by this 7. Take a look over here. We've got our addition sign because we're going to be adding all of these products up together in order to get our final product, 87 times 63. And we've got our 3 here, 3 times 87. Again, we broke it down into tens and into ones, 8 tens, 7 ones. And if you wanted to double check, did I distribute the 87 correctly? All you would have to do is add up this 80 and this 7 to get your 87. And the same thing with the 60 and the 3. 60 plus 3 is 63. Basically, distributive property is breaking numbers apart and then putting them back together to simplify doing your math. So let's get going. Down here, we need to distribute our 60 to multiply by 80 and also by 7. Same thing over here. Our 3 needs to be distributed to multiply the 3 by the 80 and the 3 by the 7. So, I'm sure that I'm reading your mind when you're saying, okay, Miss Fields, distributive property is supposed to make the multiplication process easy, right? 60 times 80, that's a big number. You're totally right. And I'm going to give you a quick trick to make your multiplying numbers greater than the ones place super, super easy whenever there is a 0 present. So what I do personally when I'm multiplying big numbers like 60 and 80 is I just take the 0 off and I add it back at the end. So pretend like you're using your eraser. Take away that 0. Take away that 0. You're left with a 6 and an 8. 6 times 8, that's easy, 48. And remember, add back in those zeros. 48 plus 2 zeros, that is 4,800. Using that same trick, take away that 0. 6 times 7, 42. Add the 0 right back on, and you've got 420. Same thing over here. 3 times 80. Take away that 0, and you've got 3 times 8. 3 times 8 is 24. Add that 0 back on, and your product is 240. Last but not least, we don't need to use our trick with our zeros because we've only got two ones places, the 3 and the 7. Multiply 3 by 7, and you get 21. So I'm sure you're seeing that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different products. So which one's the right one to answer our question to the expression, 87 times 63? The only way that you're going to know the product is by adding them all together. Like I said before, the distributive property is breaking numbers apart and then putting them back together to make it easy for you to multiply. So let's do it. We're going to put it all back together by adding up all 4 of our products. Make sure that whenever you add, you line up the place values. Your ones are lined up, your tens are lined up, your hundreds are lined up, and your thousand places are lined up. In my mind, what I'm doing is I'm going to add on from right to left, and I'm going to add up my ones place. 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 is 1. Moving on to our tens place, 0 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2 is 8. Moving on over to our hundreds place, we've got 8 plus 4 plus 2, which is 14. Put down the 4 and carry the 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. And our product for 87 times 63 is 5,481. So moving on, this entire process, it's a little bit messy and it's a little bit hard to follow. So I'm going to give you another tool to put in your toolbox, which is called box method. Now, if you remember our previous multiplication problem, it was 63 times 87. So in this nice, neat little box, that's why it's called box method, I broke apart my numbers into tens and into ones, tens and into ones. And I'm simply going to multiply each of these numbers in their respective boxes. So starting here, I'm going to multiply my 2 tens places. So my 60 and my 80. Using that same trick that I gave you guys, I'm going to take off the zeros. I'm going to multiply the 2 numbers by themselves, 6 times 8, which is 48. And then I'm going to add back in those 2 zeros to get 4,800. Again, I've only got one box filled out here. I've got 3 more multiplication problems to go. Our next multiplication problem is going to be 60 times 7. We've got to redistribute that 60 to the 7. Take away that 0. 6 times 7 is 42. Add it back in that 0 to get 420. Again, 2 multiplication problems are done, but we've still got 2 more in order to get the complete product. Next, we're going to multiply our 3 times 80. Take away that 0. You've got 3 times 8, which is 24. Add back in that 0. You get 240. And last but not least, we've got our 2 ones. 3 times 7, which is 21. I want to remind you, 5th graders, that this looks beautiful. It's completely filled out, but you're only going to get your product by adding up each of these individual products. Again, after you add up all of these products, your answer should be exactly the same as the previous example, which is 5,481. Again, thank you for joining me for tips, tricks, and other math tools. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great night.